you. Well, first of all, I want to thank all our readers, the wonderful, superb readers who are going to read tonight and have come from various places. I'm going to introduce Bill Henderson, and just briefly, he's 6 memoirs, a novel, Lifetime Achievement Awards from Poets and Writers, Barnes & Noble, the National Book Critics Circle, all kinds of things. But I really want to address the Pushcart Prize, and especially this new one, this new edition, for number 42. There's something about collecting the best, if it's an interesting word, but certainly very good, important work that's been done this year from small presses. Not only is it great for the small presses, but the work and the quality of the work holds up a mirror in, as you all know, this very special time, this very dark time that needs a very strong mirror. And what it holds up and what it reflects is what I think is best among us. And this work shows and shines and celebrates at a time when we need it most. So I want to thank Bill for 42 years having the strength to bring this out. Bill Henderson.
Thank you, my friend of many, many years. I noticed to my chagrin, I'm a Luddite, so I don't know any of these things. I stumbled onto YouTube, and all these things, all these proceedings are on YouTube, back through the years. And I see myself, I see Phil and all our writers. And so I'm going to make a statement to the United States of America, like Jeff Sessions was doing the other day. And this is boring. It's just as boring as Jeff Sessions. But I've got to say it. And I have a little cold, so just hang in there with me. If I start to cry or hack myself to death, it's part of it. We all got it. Very fancy now. Anyway. Okay, you YouTubers out there. I think all of us can agree that this past year has been a terrible year for writers who value the truth. From the very top, the written word has been denigrated. I would like to suggest that small press writers are now even more important than ever. In this age of chameleons, yahoos, and demagogues, our small press writers keep great literature alive and make the word as true as possible. As Raymond Carver once said, small presses are the backbone of our national literature. In this light, I hope you will realize that we are all, particularly the Pushcart Prize, in a unique kind of danger. Small presses maintain our integrity and oppose those who would turn our minds into mush. Accolades for Pushcart continued into our 43rd year. Kirkus Review's Advance commented this year, Pushcart Prize volumes are an invaluable record of what's been happening in America's more or less official literary culture. And just a few days ago, Publishers Weekly chimed in, calling the book an illustrious array of writers who value the written word. I believe that this says more than I ever could about how much the prize means to our writers and small press editors, the people who keep the faith against all odds and often mind-numbing conditions, be they political, corporate, or academic. End of statement, YouTube. Now we forget the propaganda. Just a little idea of what's going on here. It has nothing to do with me, by the way. I'm just a secretary, so forget all this. We get 8,000 nominations every year from hundreds of presses. And we have 200 staff contributing editors. I don't know how I pay them. In fact, I don't. There's one of them right there. As I say, I'm the secretary and occasionally the cheerleader. So this victory of 42 years, and we're still standing, belongs literally to the thousands of writers and the small presses out there, to their spirit. It's a victory of spirit not a person. Many people to thank tonight: Phil, Monica, Writer's Studio, our illustrious readers, Chai, Chase, Grace, and Jim, our visiting dignitaries. John Baker from Publishers Weekly is over there. He's been in Publishers Weekly for 30 years, and more than any other person in this whole world, John made the Pushcart Prize, kept us going. Starred reviews, the whole schmear. Danny Dolgen and Lorraine Gardner are here. Where is Danny? Oh, there he is. He's our lawyer. He costs a fortune, but he's worth it. No, he's pro bono all the way. And he was my student when I just got out of college. I was 23 and Danny was, 13? And he was my student, so we got together later on, and we've been close friends ever since. If I missed you, Bob Seidman's over there. High school, 1959, Lower Merion High School outside of Philadelphia. My friend for many, many years. Who did I miss? Who's disappointed? Just raise your hand. All right. And thanks finally to Lily. I hope she'd be here. Lily's my daughter. She's going to have twin boys, identical twin boys, in a couple of months. I'm wearing her hat. She wore this when she was playing baseball out in Long Island, and she caught a long fly ball and impossible to catch. And I've never forgotten him. Oh, there's Paul Bresnick. He was there too, and Susan Duff. And they were there probably. They saw her catch this impossible fly ball. This is the hat she was wearing. And now she's 34 years old, and she's having twin boys. And I'm going to be a grandpappy. So she sends her best. That's about it, except I'm going to do one thing. Somebody died. Lots of people died last year, but somebody very close to me died, and I never met him. I never even talked to him. His name was Brian Doyle. Does anybody know Brian Doyle? Have you heard him? He's one of the great treasures of this country. Mary Oliver called his gratitude, his sweet lyrical reaching, as a gift to all of us. Cynthia Ozek compared him to Walt Whitman and Mark Twain and Emily Dickinson and Francis of Assisi, all in the same thing. This is, and he writes these little short things. One is in the Pushcart Prize. Don't miss it. Take you 2 seconds to read it. It'll knock you on the floor. Everything he does, it's not poetry, but it has, in prose, it has the same impact. He's a religious guy. Forgive him. I am too. Religious in the sense of great empathy and compassion. Catholic to boot. I'm a Presbyterian. This is from a book published by a small press called A Book of Uncommon Prayer. If you don't have it, by Brian Doyle, get it. From Sorin Press, S-O-R-I-N. I call my daughter Madonna, by the way. Don't get me started. And when you see your daughter creating life, you can't talk about it. It's beyond words. Us word slingers can't touch it. Anyway, this is Brian Doyle, dead. Yes, sometimes it feels a little odd to be addressing my most heartfelt and searing and thankful and terrified prayers to a woman who was a shy, calm Jewish girl of maybe 15 when a shock of light appeared in your house, kitchen, back bedroom. We've never been clear on that. And everything changed forever for everyone. But I know you are real, and I know you can hear me, and I know this is the core of my soul and bones. And I don't understand how, and I don't care to understand, and there's no way to ever prove or explain what I know. But you know, which is why I'm here again, this morning, mumbling in your general direction, which is everywhere. Your mercy, your capricious tenderness, your open ear, the soothe of your voice in me and out there at the same time. I can never explain to anyone how I hear you and feel your gentle hand, but I do, and many times it has sustained me and saved me in times of great sadness and fear. So it is that I sit here this morning and am grateful. Thank you for being beyond my sense and apprehension. Thank you for saying yes, not once, not once 1,000 years ago, but all day, every day, in ways far beyond my ken. Thank you for being beyond a name and a body now, but alive and vibrant in every moment. Thank you for saving me when I stood at the abyss. Thank you for holding my children in the star furnace of your love. Thank you for catching my spirit when I crumble and dissolve and my body fades, and everything I was is gathered and slathered and shaped anew. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for being in it with me. And so, amen. God bless Brian Doyle. Now, don't applaud. It's a prayer, damn it. Where's Chai? Oh. CHAKRABARTI, you got that? Is a writer of, he's in the new book, new PP. Is a writer of fiction and poetry. His short fiction has been anthologized in the O. Henry Prize Stories, the Best American Short Stories, and Pushcart Prize 17. I can't read Roman numerals. It's XVII, right? His poetry has been published in Hayden's Ferry Review, Barrow Street, and other journals. Chai was an emerging writers fellow with a public space in 2015, a great magazine, and received his MFA from Brooklyn College. He lives in Brooklyn with his family. Chai, it's all yours, man.
Thank you so much, Bill Henderson. Thank you to everybody who puts together this wonderful anthology, and to everybody at the Writer's Studio who made this event happen, and to a public space where the story originally appeared. So I'm going to read from the story. It's called A Small Sacrifice for an Enormous Happiness. And I'll just read from the beginning, so hopefully it will all make sense. From his balcony, Nikhil waited and watched the street as hyacinth braiders tied floral knots, rum sellers hauled bags of ice, and the row of elderly typists, who'd seemed elderly to him since he'd been a boy, struck the last notes of their daily work. Beside him on the balcony, his servant Kanu plucked at the hair that grew from his ears. "Keep a lookout for Babu," Nikhil shouted to Kanu. "I'll check on the tea." Kanu was so old he could neither see nor hear well, but he still accepted each responsibility with enthusiasm. The tea was ready, as were the sweets, the whole conical pile of them, the base layer of pistachio mounds, the center almond bars that Nikhil had rolled by hand himself, and on the top 3 lychees from the garden, so precariously balanced a single misstep would have upset their delectable geometry. When he returned to the balcony, he saw Sharma walking up the cobbled lane, his oiled hair shining in the late afternoon light. The typist greeted him with a verse from a Bollywood number. Sharma's boxer's jaw and darling eyes reminded the typists of an emerging movie star, and Sharma shook his head and laughed. Kanu limped downstairs to let Sharma in, and Nikhil waited in the living room while the two of them made their way up. "And what is the special occasion?" Sharma said, eyeing the pile of confections with a boyish grin. Nikhil refused to say. He allowed Sharma to have his fill, watching with satisfaction as his fingers became honey-glazed from the offering. Afterward, when they lay on the great divan, hand-carved and older than his mother's ghost, Nikhil breathed deeply to calm his heart. He feared the words would be eaten in his chest, but he'd been planning to tell Sharma for days, and there was no going back now. As evening settled, the air between them became heavy with the sweetness of secrecy. But secrecy had a short wick. "My dearest, fairest boy," he said, "I want our love to increase." Sharma raised his eyebrows, those lines thickly drawn, nearly fused. Who better than Sharma to know Nikhil's heart? Who but Sharma to take it all in stride? "I desire to have a child with you," Nikhil said. Nikhil had trouble reading Sharma's expression in the waning light, so he repeated himself. His fingers were shaking, but he took Sharma's hand anyway, gave it a squeeze. "I heard you the first time," Sharma said. A rare cool wind had prompted Nikhil to turn off the ceiling fan, and now he could hear the rum sellers on the street enunciating prices in sing-song Urdu. He touched Sharma's face, traced the line of his jaw, unsure still of how his lover had received his news. Likely, Sharma was still mulling. He formed his opinions, Nikhil believed, at the pace the street cows strolled. Nikhil waited out the silence as long as he could. "Listen," he finally said, "the country is changing." "A child diapered by two men," said Sharma. "Your country is changing faster than my country is changing. What about the boys from Kerala?" They had learned about a school teacher and a postal clerk who'd secretly made a life together. Unfashionably attired and chubby-cheeked, they seemed too dull for the news. A few months ago, locals threw acid on their faces. Even in the black and white of the photographs, their scars along the jaw, the nose, the better half of a cheek. 10 years since man had landed on the moon, and still, "We are not boys from Kerala. We are protected." No ruse better than a woman in the home, Nikhil had argued over a year ago, and eventually Sharma had agreed to a marriage of convenience. Kanu, who had loved Nikhil through his childhood and even through his years of chasing prostitutes, had arranged for a village woman who knew about the two men's relationship but would never tell. Nikhil rummaged through his almirah and returned with a gift in his hands. "You close your eyes now." "Oh, Nikhil." But Sharma closed his eyes, accustomed now perhaps to receiving precious things. Around Sharma's neck, Nikhil tied his dead mother's necklace. It had been dipped in 24 carats of gold by master artisans of Agra. Miniature busts of Queen Victoria decorated its circumference, a piece for the museums, a jeweler had once explained, but Nikhil wanted Sharma to have it. That morning, when he'd visited the family vault to retrieve it, he'd startled himself at the enormity of what he was giving away. But what better time than now, as they were about to begin a family? "Promise you'll dream about a child with me. It is beautiful, and I will wear it every day, even though people will wonder, what is that under my shirt? Let them wonder. You are entirely mad. Mad is what you are." Nikhil was pulled back to the divan. Sharma, lifting Nikhil's shirt, placed a molasses square on his belly, teasing a trail of sweetness with his tongue. Nikhil closed his eyes and allowed himself to be enjoyed. Down below, the rum sellers negotiated, the prices of bottles fluctuating wildly. Afterward, they retired to the roof. Their chadors cut off the cold, but Nikhil still shivered. When Sharma asked what the matter was, Nikhil kissed the spot where his eyebrows met. There was another old roof across the street where grandmothers were known to gossip and eavesdrop, but he did not care. Let them hear, he thought. Let them feel this wind of enormous change. The next morning, while Sharma washed, Nikhil said, "I want you to toss the idea to your wife. Get Tripti used to the matter." Sharma dried himself so quickly he left behind footprints on the bathroom's marble floor. "Toss the idea to my wife, get her used to the matter," Sharma said, before he changed into his working clothes, leaving Nikhil to brood alone. Tripti would have few issues with the arrangement of a child, Nikhil believed. After all, at the time of her marriage to Sharma, her family was mired in bankruptcy. Her father had left them nothing but a reputation for drink and dishonesty, and she herself, insofar as he recalled from his sole meeting with her at the wedding, was a dour, spiritless creature who deserved little of the bounty that had been provided her. What little else he knew was from Kanu's reports. Extremely pliable, Kanu had first said. Then, closer to the wedding, a little stubborn about the choice of sweets. She wants village kind. On that note, Nikhil had wilted. Let her have her desserts, he'd said. The wedding paid for and the matter removed from mind. The next few days, when Sharma was away at the village and at the foundry, Nikhil paced around the house, overcome by the idea of a child. He'd always dreamed of becoming a father, but had never believed it would be his due until this year's monsoon, when, in the middle of a deluge, his 42-year-old sister had given birth to a girl. The rain had been so fierce, no ambulance could ferry them to the hospital, so the elderly women of the family assumed the duties of midwifery and delivered the child themselves. The first moment he saw his niece, he nearly believed in God, and strangely in his own ability, his right to produce so perfect a thing. He couldn't bring Sharma to his sister's house to meet his new niece, so the next week he'd spent their Thursday together sharing photos. If Sharma experienced the same lightness of being, he didn't let show. All Sharma said was, "Quite a healthy baby she is." It was true. She'd been born 9 pounds, 2 ounces. The family had purchased a cow so that fresh milk would always be available. Nikhil convinced himself that Sharma had opened his heart to the idea of fathering, but the exuberance of this conclusion led to certain practical questions. Sharma's wife would be the carrier of the child, but where would the child live? In Sharma's house in the village? Or in Nikhil's house here in the city? If she lived in the village, which Nikhil admitted was the safer option, how would Nikhil father her? How would she receive a proper education? These questions consumed the hours. When he went to check on his tenants, he was distracted and unable to focus on their concerns. A leaky toilet, a broken window, the group of vagrants who'd squatted outside one of his properties, all these matters seemed trivial compared to his imagined child's needs. The next week, the afternoon before he would see Sharma again, he stepped into a clothing store on Rash Bihari Avenue to calm his mind. It was a shop he'd frequented to purchase silk kurtas for Sharma or paisley shirts for himself. He told the attendants he needed an exceptional outfit for his niece. They combed the shelves and found a white dress with a lacy pink bow. He imagined his daughter wearing it. From his dreaming, he was certain a girl would come out of their love. Srishti was what he'd named her. Srishti, enunciating like a princess. Srishti riding her bicycle up and down Kakulia Lane. Early on, they'd agreed Nikhil would avoid the foundry, but he was feeling so full of promise for Srishti that he did not deter himself from continuing down Rash Bihari Avenue toward Taliganj Fari, nor did he prevent himself from walking to the entrance of Mahesh Steel and asking for his friend. Sharma emerged from the uneven music of metalworking with a cigarette between his lips. His Apollonian features were smeared with grease. His hands were constricted by thick welding gloves, which excluded the possibility of even an accidental touch. When he saw Nikhil, Sharma scowled. "Sir," he said, "you'll have the parts tomorrow." Though he knew Sharma was treating him as a customer for good reason, the tone still stung. Nikhil whispered, "See what I've brought." He produced the perfect baby girl dress. "You have lost your soup," Sharma whispered back. Then, so everyone could hear, "Babu, you'll have the parts tomorrow, latest tomorrow." Nikhil tried again. "Do you see the collar, the sweet lace?" "You should go to your home now," Sharma said. "Tomorrow, I'll see you." But that Thursday, Sharma failed to visit. Nikhil and Kanu waited until 9:30 and then ate their meal together by lamplight. I'm going to stop there. Thank you. So it is my great honor to introduce the next reader, who is Chase Twitchell. Chase Twitchell's most recent book is Horses Where the Answers Should Have Been, New and Selected Poems from Copper Canyon, which won both the Kingsley Tufts Award and the Balcones Poetry Prize. A new book, Things as It Is forthcoming from Copper Canyon in 2018. She lives in upstate New York with her husband, the novelist Russell Banks. Thank you so much for being here, Chase.
Thank you, and thank you for that reading. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, organizers of this event. I'm going to read from the new book, which is in 5 sections, and it's actually a strangely organized book. It's kind of like 5 chapbooks, each distinct unto itself. So I've chosen 2 poems from each section. I think of this as kind of a plate of hors d'oeuvres. The first 2, Bob Dylan figures in. My Bob Dylan. And these 2 poems are about first love. Back then, everybody knew the music. The brash, young, coarsely graded voice. The words that said, "Shut up and listen." August in the North Country. That's my Bob Dylan. The cold brook of first love. The sound of something passing. Rain on the tent. Rain hissing in the fire. And then this one is in the 2018 Pushcart, which makes me very happy, even though it's called Sad Song. It's ridiculous at my age to have to pull the car onto the shoulder because Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash are singing Girl from the North Country, taking turns remembering not one girl, but each of their girls, one and then the other. A duet that forces tears from my eyes so that I have to pull off the road and weep. Ridiculous. My sadness is 50 years old. It travels into sorrow and gets lost there. Not because it calls up first love, though it does, or first loss of love, though both are shawls it wears to hide its wound. A wound to the girl of which all men sing, the girl split open, the sluice through which all of childhood pours, carrying her out of one country into another, in which she grows up wearing a necklace of stones, one for each girl not her, though they all live together here in the North Country, where the winds hit heavy on the borderline. The last line and a half stolen from Bob Dylan. The second group of poems is about Earth death. Before the ash, no other species leaves its dreams strewn across the earth, its dreams and its trash, the scars of its wars. I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, said Albert Einstein. But World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. All the killing, centuries of it, Where will we bury all the bones? No need to worry. In the end, no one will be doing any burying. Let's go back and live in Pompeii, where olives burst from the trees and all the dogs are still alive. Before the ash, and with ignorance of the ash. Crickets at the end of the world. Right now it's crossover time. Grasshoppers still razzing the field as the crickets tune up. It always surprises me when someone confuses grasshoppers and crickets. They say the same words. Don't love us, we're going away. But crickets are smaller, more like bullets, harder to see, night insects, dark in the dark grass. The cricket's voice is more strident than that of the grasshopper. The words are the same, but their song knows it's about to end. The third part is a series of elegies for my mother, who died a couple of years ago, with a few for my father thrown in, although he got his bunch of poems in the last book. This is a slightly longer poem. Mom Looking Skinny, Bermuda, 1958. And the photograph it describes at the beginning is an actual photo in my childhood photo album, which Mom carefully assembled. And it's a picture that's always kind of haunted me and made me wonder what was really going on. Mom Looking Skinny, Bermuda, 1958. The family's sitting on the pink bungalow steps, the couple and the two daughters, 6 and 8. A stranger walking by took the shot. 4 late afternoon shadows. Mom's only jewelry is her collarbone. She hugs her long shins, kneecaps distinct, shanks and shins and feet in sandals, the foot bones clusters of twigs and nacreous shells. Underlying the beautiful wife skin, you see the young skeleton laid bare. The day's adventure was a trip to the horse's graveyard. Only the locals know where it is. You have to walk far from the village, far from the pink-white tourist beaches. The sea has eaten out a narrow cove, coral pocked and piled up in porous chunks, so sharp that a mere brush across it raises pin lines of blood which rinse away and reform. All the whole skulls have been taken, but teeth are plentiful and vertebrae. Racks of bleached ribs emerge, picked clean by turkey vultures and crabs, blasted by sand. They bury the horses, then let the storms take them. Dismantling the bodies is the waves' work. The children gather teeth. They see the shock of a horse only half consumed by carrion eaters and the sea, snagged on rocks. Meat with bones emerging and the skull already gone, somewhere an empty head, and the tail washing back and forth in the shallows. Her ashes. I touched them, her ashes, when we gathered by the Atlantic's cold, green-gray concussions to free her, handful by handful, from the form she had taken in the world. She was silky and gritty and purified. I had to rinse my hands of her ghost. I'm a student of Zen Buddhism, and the fourth section collects all the most overtly Zen poems, although I sneak them in throughout. Cages for unknown animals. That's what I build, trapping only shadows of their mystery. Traps I abandon, since shadows also escape them. I study the places where darkness collects, always cageless, always camouflaged, to see what goes there to drink. Poems should be made of nothing but truth and mystery, but either truth or mystery usually escapes. Roadkill. I want to see things as they are without me. Why? I don't know. As a kid, I always looked at roadkill close up and poked a stick into it. I want to look at death with eyes like my own baby eyes, not yet blinded by knowledge. I told this to my friend the monk, and he said, "Want, want, want." Now, I chose this one. This is from the final section, which I can't really put a tag on the way I can with the others. But I picked this one because it's the only poem in the book in which New York appears. And I figured, since I was here, and there is one passage in it that's a quote, and it comes from the International Cat Association breed standards for the toiger. And this is called Toigers. In a litter of mackerel tabbies, one kitten had a strange face with black parentheses, like a tiger's. Desire sank its claws in a breeder's mind. She searched the world for cats with the same genetic mutation. Street cats in India, shelter cats, purebred rejects, and over 20 years produced her imaginary animal, the toiger. Among other qualities, natural makeup is important. Eyes must have black mascara markings and whited spectacles. Desirable for mouth to have black lipstick markings. Will that be adequate camouflage in 50 years or 100 years? I hope these little tiger creatures survive. I hope they go feral, proliferate, drive the rats from New York, and restore harmony and order to the universe. And I will end with this one. What's Wrong with Me? That's without a question mark. It appeared in a magazine with a question mark, which was very distressing. Because I'm telling you what's wrong with me, I'm not asking you. What's wrong with me? The end of the world is not what's wrong with me. Old age, illness, and death are not wrong. They just are. A stone says, wake up. Exactly this is all there is. Everything says it. A sick coyote crossing the field, poisoned, injured, rabid, old. The rest of the pack anxious, yipping and howling back and forth across the valley as dusk comes on. What's wrong with me is that I find their music beautiful. I dwell on it long after it stops. And in the silence afterward, I write down its words. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to introduce Jim Shepard, assuming he is here. That would be a good assumption. There he is. We had a change of order here. Jim Shepard has written 7 novels, including The Book of Aaron, which won the Sophie Brody Medal for Excellence in Jewish Literature, the Penn New England Award for Fiction, and the Clark Fiction Prize. Triple honors. And 5 short story collections, including Like You'd Understand Anyway, which has to be one of the great titles, a finalist for the National Book Award and Story Prize winner, and most recently, The World to Come. 6 of his stories have been chosen for the Best American Short Stories, 2 for the Penn O. Henry Prize Stories, and 2 for Pushcart Prizes. He's also won the Library of Congress Massachusetts Book Award for Fiction and the Rhea Award for the short story. Please welcome Jim Shepard.
Thank you, Chase. Thank you, everybody who had a hand in organizing this nice thing. I'm going to read from the beginning of a story that's yet another example of my ongoing preoccupation with catastrophe, a preoccupation that is, as our country has gone down the toilet, taken me from a status as a sort of a faintly worrisome fringe figure to somebody who looks like he's just reading the papers. And I have the honor, I think I might be the only reader today who has the honor of having the person who nominated him or her in the audience, and that is my friend Sandra Leong, who I think is the only one who put this story forward. So if you find yourself bitterly disappointed by this, take it up with her, essentially. She's the one who got us here, essentially. This is a story called Telemachus, and it's about, besides catastrophe, the myriad ways in which, despite ourselves, we let each other down in big and small modes. To commemorate Easter Sunday, the captain has spread word of a ship-wide contest for the best news of 1942. The winner to receive a double tot of rum each evening for a week. The contestants have their work cut out for them. Singapore has fallen. The Prince of Wales and the Repulse have been sunk. The Dutch East Indies have fallen. Burma is in a state of collapse. Darwin has been so severely bombed that the naval base there had to be abandoned. The only combatants in the entire Indian Ocean standing between the Japanese Navy and a link-up in the Gulf of Aden with the Germans, who are currently having their way in Russia and North Africa, seem to be a single Dutch gunboat that we came across a week ago with a spirited crew and a crippled rudder, and ourselves. We are the Telemachus, as our first lieutenant reminds us each morning on the voice pipe, a T-class submarine, not so grand as a U, but not quite so dismal as an S. Most of us have served on S's and are grateful for the difference, though we do register the inferiority of our own boat to every other nation's. The Royal Navy leads the world in battleships and cruisers, we like to say, and trails even the Belgians in submarine design. In the chaos following Singapore's surrender, we've been provided no useful intelligence or patrol orders. A run through the Sunda Straits between Java and Sumatra ended in a hail of enemy fire on the approaches to Batavia. On our last dry dock, the Ceylonese further undermined our morale by invariably gazing out of their harborside windows at first light to see if the Japanese had landed yet. We have no idea whether any subsequent ports will be available to us now that we have shipped back out to sea, nor if we will have access to more torpedoes once we have expended our store. Heads up there, boys, our captain joked to us, to those of us within earshot of his map table last night. Is there anything more exhilarating than carrying on alone out on the edge of a doomed world? Sounds like Fisher's childhood, sir, Mills responded, and everyone looked at me and laughed. They view me as a sorry figure even by the standards of their meager histories. As a boy, I was a horrid disappointment, pigeon-chested, gap-toothed, and as grandiose as I was untalented. The only activity for which I was any use at all was running, so I ran continually, though naturally not in competitions or road races, but just all about the countryside. Both in fair weather and foul, it brought me not a trace of schoolboy glory, although it did at times alleviate my fury at being so awful at everything else. The characterization my parents favored for me was out of hand, as in, something must be done when the boy gets out of hand. My stepfather inclined toward the strap, my mother the reproachful look. Her brother had been killed in the First War, and her first husband had come to a bad end as well, and my stepfather never tired of pointing out to us that a disapproving countenance was her solution to most of life's challenges. He said about me that by the time I was out of short pants and he was forced to introduce me at pubs or on the streets, his friends sympathized. My father had been presumed lost at sea on a bulk cargo ship that went missing between Indonesia and New South Wales. When I asked if he had loved me, my mother always replied that it hurt too much to recall such happiness in any detail. And when I required particulars of her nonetheless, she said only that he had been quick to laugh and that no man had possessed a greater capacity to forgive. And when I asked my aunts, they said they'd barely known the man. And when I asked if he had at least been pleased with me, they said they were sure that that had been the case, though they also remembered him not much liking children. My stepfather viewed my running as a method of avoiding achievement or honest labor, and marveled at my capacity for sloth. He pressed upon me engineering principles for boys and elementary statistics and all sorts of other impressive-looking volumes I refrained from opening. He asked if I was really so incurious about the world of men, and I reassured him that, in fact, I was very curious about that world, to which he responded that in such case, I must bear in mind that this world was also the sphere of industry. And I clarified that I meant the adventurous world of men, the arena of tropic seas and volcanic cataclysms and cannibal feasts and polar exploits. And he said that if I wanted to grow up a fool, I might as well join the Navy, which was precisely what I had already resolved to do. When he arrived aboard, Mills told everyone that he'd been one of those posh boys who'd gone to boarding school where at great expense he'd been provided rotten food and insufficient air and exercise, and therefore submarine duty oddly suited him. His father had been great with speculation until it had all gone smash and he had hanged himself. Mills remembered his mother sitting in the drawing room during the following months with all the many bills she didn't dare to open since there was no money to pay them. And he'd thought it would be a good thing if she had one less mouth to feed. And so he had been a chauffeur, and then a silk stocking salesman, a shipyard hand, and the second mate of a sailing ship before signing on with His Majesty's Navy. As gunner's mates, we bunk in the torpedo storage compartment between the tubes. He calls me the monk because in this tiny space, I never bother with pictures or photographs. I carry what I want to see in my head. Everything else feels like clutter. Our mate here doesn't know how to take things easy, he says, by way of explaining me to our fellow torpedo men. He seems to believe that he panders to my whimsies with a resigned good humor. Mills had been assigned to us at Harwich as a replacement for a mate we'd lost to carbon monoxide poisoning when a torpedo's engine had started prematurely in the tube. He'd asked me confidentially what sort of boat he was joining, and I recounted for him our most recent patrol, which I described as 3 weeks of misery we'd endured without sighting a single enemy ship. We'd run aground and been unsuccessfully bombed by our own Air Force. We'd also damaged our bow in a collision with the dock upon our return. He said that on his most recent patrol, they'd surfaced between 2 startled German destroyers, each so close abeam that their bow wakes had spattered onto the submarine's deck. On the bridge, he and the captain had simply gaped up at the Germans above them, since for the moment they were below the elevation of the Germans' guns and too close to ram without the destroyers also hitting each other. Then he said they'd pitched back down the conning tower ladder with the Germans still shrieking curses at them. He said they'd mostly worked the Arctic reaches out of Murmansk, sinking so much German tonnage that the Russians had presented them with a reindeer. He said he was pining for a nurse he'd met in the Red Cross, who last he'd heard had been sent to London and now no doubt was pouring lemonade over the wounded in the East End. Her father, on first meeting him, had cordially asked, "And who or what are you?" And upon his reply, her mother had remarked only that people had been doing dreadful things at sea for as long as she could remember. He said that when he managed to arrange some privacy with the nurse and attempted a liberty with her, she begged him instead to do something useful. Though he had been encouraged by her remark about her father that no man had ever behaved so badly with the ladies and gotten away with it. Occasionally, when he was particularly displeased with the lack of vivacity in my responses, he'd say he didn't suppose that I had any experiences of my own to relate, and I'd assure him I had very few. Though before I'd left home, I had, in fact, conceived of an intense and inappropriate fondness for a cousin on my mother's side. Marjorie's own mother displayed in her house a photograph of herself and my lost father alone under an arbor, peering at each other and smiling. Though when I'd asked about it, the woman had appeared faintly stricken and was no more informative than my mother. When I was 14 and my cousin 12, I had lured her into a neighbor's garden and in my overheated state had crowded my face in close to hers, much to her alarm. Bees were drowsing above a flower she was examining. She then fixed her eyes on my mouth, and when I moved even closer, she backed farther away. She was chary around me during our visits afterwards, but had also taken my hand under tables in dining rooms, and once, having run into me unexpectedly in a hallway, had put a finger to my lips. In my fantasies, I still imagined an unlikely world in which I would be allowed to marry her, and she would happily agree to this. In the packet of correspondence I received when arriving in the Pacific, my mother noted that my cousin had let on that I was writing her at least. And in her response to my letters, Marjorie asked apropos of nothing if I recalled a day years earlier during which I had acted very odd in the garden. When off duty, I lay on my berth between tubes 5 and 6 and wondered what others would make of someone who could imagine tenderness for only one other being, and an improper tenderness at that. I think I will stop there. Thank you. Am I introducing Grace? I'm supposed to be introducing Grace Schulman, who I don't think I should be introducing because she's not here, it sounds like. So I think it's only fair. Everybody should get, what, 12 of the $15 back, don't you think? Anyway, thank you all for coming, and I'm sure those of us who read would literally sign anything you put in front of us. So thank you again.